And welcome back to Scream with me. Uh, this My name is Rusty. If you've never been here before, this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And yes, we're going to move on now, as I promised in the last video. We're going to move on now to another little cool indie horror movie that I fell in love with. I also can't show you. This is another one I had to buy digitally because low print runs. It's like 25 bucks is what I could find it for on DVD. It was like ridiculous. I wish people would stop that shit. But in any event, yeah, we're going to now talk about, because I love it. I would love to have it in my collection, and I guess I do. It's it's me and my brother's Voodoo account, so I mean it is mine. I do own it, but you know, I have to have it. I have to have it. I don't feel right if I don't have it. I have to have it in my greedy little hands. It's all mine. Mine, 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 Spartacus. Well, yeah, I'd like to have that in my greedy little hands too, but I digress. So now we're going to talk about this wonderful little movie. It's horror comedy. I don't like a lot of horror comedies, but this one's really good. And it's more horror than comedy, but the comedy is really cool. I really like the comedy in it. And that is The Wolf of Snow Hollow. The Wolf of Snow Hollow was released in 2020, and it was directed by Jim Cummings, and it was written by Jim Cummings, and it stars Jim Cummings, Riki Lindhome, and Robert Forster. And yeah, so we are going to get into that now and take a little story trip to Snow Hollow. Yeah. So the movie opens with a young couple who are arriving at this very popular ski resort town called Snow Hollow. They've come to, stay in a cabin and do all the things that you do in a snowy ski resort town, right? So the setup is pretty good. It's reminiscent of a Scream setup in that you have this little introduction to the movie, the introductory kills or kill. So this couple comes here. They're really nice. The first thing that happens, they check into the cabin, and they go into town where they're at a restaurant, the local restaurant, where they run into one of the locals and his friends named PJ. Now PJ and the couple is Brianna and I can't think of the guy's name, but you know, um, I've only seen it once for God's sakes. But yeah, so they run into this local who's being really really loud and carrying on like locals will, especially that kind of thug local. But he says something very very anti-gay, using the f bomb, and that pisses the guy off. And he like yells at him, to keep it down, and the guy kind of gets all butch with him for a second, but he's a nice big dude. So little PJ, the little local thug, he kind of backs down a little bit, and the girlfriend gets on to the guy, about, that was kind of dumb. What you're going to start fights from? And it turns out it's like, well, if he hadn't used that word, I wouldn't have, reacted the way I did. But my brother is gay, and what if my brother was here? I'm just not putting up with that in public. So I thought that was kind of cute, cool. But so you kind of got introduced to PJ right then, and then they finish their dinner and they go back where they're having this romantic evening because he is preparing to propose to her, obviously that night. So they're in the hot tub and being all smexy when and like I said, this is a comedy. This is a horror comedy, so there's a lot of comedy elements in it. And I didn't really get this, but it was funny. But she was basically asked him, to do her a favor, and she was like, she said something about shave the bristles or cut the grass or something like that. And I'm like, but so he goes and takes a shower, and you see him in there taking the shower, and he's obviously shaving. And I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay. obviously, obviously she likes things smooth. But she goes outside to do something and accidentally cuts the hot water off, um, which makes him scream and yell in the shower where he's obviously shaving himself, and he then gets out and goes looking for her, um, and he finds her in the front yard at the bottom of the steps, and she is ripped to shreds. I mean, there are parts of her gone. It's like a Jack the Ripper kind of scene. So don't let the comedy elements fool you. This is a very graphic and gory movie, on top of having, the really funny comedic elements. But so he finds this body and he freaks out, and we're introduced to the rest of the, main cast, which is the sheriff who is on the verge of retirement but refusing to. His son is a completely stressed out lunatic named John, and Julia is the next in line. So she's like his main detective, and then he is right under his father. So there's lots of comedy between him and his father, wanting him to retire because of his heart condition and stuff. So they go up there and they're having to deal with this horrific murder scene. And they did show you when the guy found the body, there was a paw print that looked like a big giant paw, like a wolf claw print in the sand. But I don't know. It looked a little manufactured to me, which is I think what they were, because see the whole point of the movie is there a wolf? Is there a werewolf or is there not? Um, so you've got the medical examiner and all saying that it's a wolf. You have, other deputies are like, werewolf, and of course, John, the captain, he's just like not having it. He's not having the werewolf thing. So there's lots of comedy about him in his life, which is completely, he is totally whacked. The way that we are introduced to him is at an AA meeting. So then they get the call and go see the body. So from the very beginning, you know that he's messed up, and he acts it too. He's wonderfully. His character is just wonderfully OMG. You know what I mean? So um, they investigate the murders. Uh, they interview that PJ guy because of the incident at the restaurant, and PJ is like, I didn't have nothing to do with it, but you're suspicious. He's got a nice wolf tattoo on him, so there's a little suspicion there, and so they're trying to theorize and figure out, because John, he thinks that this is a serial killer of some kind, that it's a human, not a wolf, and it's damn sure not a werewolf. So he's not having any of that. Now he is got an ex-wife and a 17-year-old daughter. The wife hates him. He hates the wife. Um, so there's a lot of comedic elements in that as well throughout the movie. Um, so the next kill is a ski instructor. So they sort of introduce her, and then, momentarily, I can't even remember her name, but they introduce her, and as she's leaving to go to a boyfriend's house, she gets attacked, and you see the werewolf. They show you this werewolf, and he's like, God, he's like 7 feet tall, and um, he looks like one of the werewolves out of Dog Soldiers. If you've ever seen the movie Dog Soldiers, that's what the werewolf in this movie looks like, is one of the werewolves from Dog Soldiers. So you're like, as an audience member, of course, you're like, oh my God, it's a fucking werewolf. And he rips that poor girl to pieces and takes her head. Whereas the other girl, Brianna, he had like taken her junk. Um, I don't even know how you would accomplish that, but I don't know. But he had like taken her junk and some other body parts, and off this one, he had taken her head. Uh, so, and once again, there were tracks, and so that was pretty fucked up. And you've seen it. You saw the werewolf. And this wasn't no wolf, because like the coroner and stuff is saying, if it's a wolf, it's got to be as big as a Kodiak bear, considering the damage that it does, because this is some real Jack the Ripper stuff going on with these poor girls that it's killed so far. And so again, you have a bunch of comedic elements where John is refusing to accept this werewolf nonsense, and thinking that it's a human, um, while more and more of his team members, the local cops, are beginning to think that it's not. Um, they're beginning to think that it is like a giant wolf or a werewolf. So you have this little dichotomy there going on, and check. One of the deputies, I guess this was like a comedy scene. One of the deputies, because you have to see this John character. He is like he is like 40 cans of Red Bull. I mean, he is just so whacked. So he's, he is so stressed that it's beyond description how stressed he is. So one of the deputies is trying to tell him that the coroner over here at this body of the ski instructor thinks it's a wolf, but can't hear him, so he like screams at him. Now there is a news van that has just pulled up behind him, and he is screaming at the guy, "What? I can't hear you. Speak up." And so the deputy yells, "They think it's a wolf," and he just kind of slaps his forehead because he saw that news truck pull up right behind him, and he slowly turns around, and you can see the newscaster smiling in the window going back up. So there's tonight's story, yeah. So he ends up firing that deputy in a funny scene, and you know, uh, you have John. There was like a scene between John and the daughter that I thought was cool because he's trying to have a normal conversation about what's going on, and she's talking all over his head and telling him that he needs to calm down and quit being so stressed out. And the reason I like that scene is because she gave a shout out to probably my favorite animated cartoon when I was a kid. And now to this day, I still watch it. I've got it on DVD. Um, But she looks at him and she hollers, I mean, well, she doesn't holler, but she looks at him and said, you need to calm down. It's not like you're Ricky Tikki Tavi. You don't have to protect the whole town. So I liked that shout out to Riki Tikki Tavi because Riki Tikki Tavi is just one of my favorite little cartoons ever. So I liked that. The next thing that I noticed was I think the director, which was the guy playing John, but I think I'm not sure if this is what he did on purpose or not, but when him and Julia, you know, who are driving around in the car, they're driving around in the patrol car, and they keep zooming in on John, you know, and I noticed that his canines were like noticeable. I mean, like not vampire length, but vampire-ish, and it's a movie about werewolves. So I was like, are you trying to throw, you know what I mean? Are you trying to throw little thing? Because you've already cast suspicion on PJ, which I wasn't really buying, and now you're kind of like, I don't know, John's got these like really long canines, noticeably long canines, and I'm like, did you do that on purpose? So that's kind of what I got the idea that maybe they were trying to get you to look in his direction too, which I admit I was. I'm suspicious of everyone, and the way this movie has went, it has kind of you're casting your eye everywhere. So John and Julia go back and visit Brianna, the first victim's boyfriend, and he is really not handling it well, and they want to know if he's remembered anything, but he doesn't. And this scene, you don't think it's important at the time, but it becomes very important later. But so they, go and visit him, and there's that little sequence, and he starts crying and everything. He really is devastated about what happened, so you kind of feel for him. Then we end up seeing a bunch of snippets of interviews, interrogations, because they're really wondering, who this is. And in between these snippets of interrogations, right before that started, there was this woman and her 3-year-old daughter sitting in the restaurant. And a guy came up, but they only showed you him from like the chest down to the thigh. He walks into the thing and he's talking to her, and you're like, why aren't they showing him? And why aren't they showing this guy? And he's like asking her kind of funny questions, and she gets suspicious, and she ends up going going up to the cashier to ask for a phone to call the police, and he leaves. And they never showed him. And I was like, okay, wait a second. You've already showed me a werewolf. You've cast suspicion on John. You've cast suspicion on PJ. Are you saying this is a person, or is this person is the werewolf? You don't know. That's what I'm saying. You're like, really, the mystery is good in this movie, the way that they're keeping you guessing as to what the hell's going on. Is it a wolf? Is it a werewolf? Is it a person pretending to be a werewolf? I mean, you just don't know. All I know is that I saw a werewolf rip that ski instructor to pieces. So, you're really left, wondering. And of course, they're interspersing her interrogation about the incident with a bunch of interrogations of other people in town, of other suspects, including that PJ guy. So later on that night, you see, yet another murder scene when that very woman and her 3-year-old daughter are going down the road, and there's a dead deer in the middle of the road. So she gets out to look at it. It's got a big wolf print on the side of it, and all of a sudden, you are shown the werewolf again because it attacks her and rips her to shred. But it also kills the baby girl who's 3. So, you know, you're like, why did they have to do that? Well, it's not like a werewolf is going to care, have any morals, is it? I mean, look what he did to the first girl. It's not like we can expect morality out of this thing. So, you know, now of course John is losing his mind. He is so stressful and stressed out that he starts drinking again. You remember he was in AA? So there's some funny scenes once he starts drinking again. So he's doing that while more bodies are piling up. So this man is losing his fucking mind is basically what's happened. Um, he gets his dad to retire that night. Um, and there's a scene that happens right after that, where we see PJ. We see PJ. Now, we had seen him again earlier. He lives in a camper out in the middle of nowhere, a little caravan, and he is shooting up with heroin. So he's obviously like a heroin addict. And he has a pet wolf, a little pet wolf. So we see him again in another scene in which there is a naked body on a bunch of wood, and he is in his backyard, where he got the camper, the caravan, and he's lighting it on fire. So you're like, well, okay, all right, so I know he's a killer, I know he's a heroin addict, but that's not the modus operandi. That's not the MO of what's been going on in this town. Um, so I didn't buy it, is what I'm saying, is that I didn't buy PJ, and I didn't buy that scene. Um, I mean, the scene was fine. I'm just saying that you didn't get me to think that PJ was any more a suspect, is what I'm saying. Because I really didn't feel that PJ was the suspect. I think it was being made too obvious. So I kind of discounted that. Obviously, he's a murderer. Obviously, he's killed somebody. But I don't think he's the one killing these other people. I don't think he's the werewolf, despite his wolf tattoo, his little wolf companion, and the fact that he's burning a body in his backyard. I just still didn't buy it, So he didn't get me on that one. So John and Julia are back to talking about theories. So you have a bunch of conversation about what the hell could be going on. Man, werewolf, what's going on. And all the cops decide to, it's a full moon. This has only happened on the full moons. So they're going to stake out the town that night. And that's the night that the father, John's just had enough. He has a breakdown and he makes his father retire on the spot that night, and he takes over. Now, little does he know, his daughter, she is violating curfew, going out on the full moon, and making out in a truck with her boyfriend. When the boyfriend, who's very nervous about it all, she's the aggressor for a change, and the boyfriend is like all nervous and we shouldn't be doing this, and then he sees a neighbor at the window, so he's like, oh, there's a neighbor watching, there's a neighbor, and the neighbor is doing this, and when the girl looks over there and wipes off the glass so she can see her clearly, the woman is actually pointing at something, and boom, you get to see the werewolf again as he attacks the daughter and the boyfriend. And that was very interesting. One of the most interesting thing was that the dad shows up, John. He shows up, starts shotgunning at this werewolf as it runs off, and the daughter is there on the ground, and the boyfriend's gone. So that's a boyfriend for you right there. He got the hell out of there. Didn't even check to see if she was okay. He saw that wolf. He saw that werewolf. His ass was gone. So, um, her and the dad get into a heated exchange because she's like, you know, he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And she's like, "How dare you be like talking to me? You didn't even ask me if I was okay." And I really liked that scene because he unleashed on her. And he was like, "No, I didn't ask you if you were okay, and I'm not going to ask you if you are okay because you're outside making out with your boyfriend when there's murders all over town, and no, fuck you." So they like were actually like F off each other, you know what I mean? So that was a pretty good scene. Um, he takes her to the hospital where she's checked out and kept overnight, and in that period, he uses her finger to unlock her phone to find out who this boyfriend was, and then he goes there and attacks the boyfriend. And at first, the mom, she thinks that it's an intruder or something, and so she's actually beating up what we know to be the sheriff now, because since his father retired. So she's basically beating up the sheriff, protecting her son, and she ends up pepper spraying them both. And then his face, he had a little T-shirt around his face. It was so stupid. But when his face came down and she saw that it was the sheriff of the town, she immediately stops attacking him and starts attacking the son, going, "What the hell did you do now to get this to happen?" So that was another funny scene. Because he just goes into the kitchen and starts pouring milk all over his face because he's just been pepper sprayed, and you can hear her beating the hell out of the kid, beating the hell out of her son upstairs, screaming at him about causing trouble and all this. She doesn't even care anymore about the sheriff who just broke into her house to beat her son up. So that was a pretty funny scene. And yeah, so let's see where we're at. Right then, as he goes back outside, um, you can hear fire, gunfire down the street, and he goes down the street, and so do all the other deputies, where they find one of the other deputies has been ripped to shreds, and nothing but his feet, his like legs are sticking up out of a garbage can, and they look in it, and his head and arms have all been detached and all. That was pretty gross. So this thing is very powerful, obviously, So you're still left wondering what the hell this is, right? And but the movie is also keeping you off balance, which I liked because you keep wanting to believe that it is a werewolf, a real werewolf, like Underworld or something. But at the same time, you have all of this little information that just keeps you not quite sure. So, um, let's see where we are. So we end up, there now they have a dead officer. John is completely cracked. He is drinking all the time. He is completely fallen off the wagon because of all of this. And we get to see another scene with PJ where PJ is shooting himself up with heroin. And then he falls out the door of his caravan and is just laying half in it and half out. And the next day at the hospital, Julia, the detective, tells him to calm down, that they found him, that they've found this killer. And when he finds out that it's this PJ guy and they check him, he's, got a long criminal history. They looked and they found that dead body that he was burning. They found it in the backyard. And He was full of drugs, of course. He had OD'd and had the werewolf tattoo, or the wolf tattoo. So it's all wrapped up, you know. And I thought to myself, bullshit. No, 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 no. It's not going to be that easy. I can tell it's not going to be that easy. So, but you know, they're sure that that's him, and they are giving you the impression that that's him. And I just did not for a second buy it that it was him. I did not believe he was a werewolf. I did not believe he would have been burning that body because none of the other bodies had been done that to. So I didn't believe that he was the werewolf at all. Um, so they think that it's him, and John ends up firing the coroner in a very funny scene, because everybody's blaming him for not having caught this person, and then he calms down. So John is back in AA. The mystery's been solved, right? John's back in AA, trying to get a grip on himself. And Julia, the detective, gets a phone call. Now, when she was packing up, you know, closing the case, when she was packing up the evidence, she noticed a spool of thick thread, you know, like you sew with thread, but it was really thick. And they showed you that little scene, and she kind of was like, what the hell is this? And she closed out the case. That night, though, she gets a phone call from the boyfriend of Brianna, the one that they went to see, the very first kill. And, you know, he was like, you know, told him who she, you know, told her who he was, and was like, I had something here that I figured y'all might want. And she was like, well, you can just send anything to us and we'll put it in storage. At the same time this conversation's going on, John is going around returning evidence that he had taken from all the various suspects and evidence to the families and stuff of the murder victims. So he was going around and doing this while Julia is on the phone with at her house with this boy. So you're seeing these two things take place at the same time, flashing back and forth. So when the boy's on the phone with her, and she, you know, he's like, no, 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 it's nothing like that. It's something that y'all left here, that y'all brought. It was in the evidence that you brought back to me, but it did not belong to us, me and Brianna. And she was like, well, what is that? And he said that it was some kind of tool used in sewing. It looked like what he said. My mom called it a seam cutter. Well, the phone went dead because Julia hung up and started running out to her car. And I was like, okay, a seam shredder, a seam. It's the thing, like if you got a pair of jeans, if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's this little hook, scalpel looking thing that you put in the seams to undo the thread so that you can like rehem it or something. So anyway, right at the time that he said that, John showed up to a guy's house to give back some evidence and get his signature. And out front it said taxidermist. And when the guy answered the door, he was like, you could tell he was like hunched over. And he invited the sheriff in, and the sheriff went in and sat down with him. And he's like, well, can you talk about the case, you know? I mean, now that it's over. And he's like, yeah, well, a little bit. So he's sitting there talking with him, but it starts bringing back memories. So he's like, you know, I think I'm going to leave now. And one of the last things the guy had said was, the guy asked him if he was married, and he says, no, Actually, no. I mean, I used to be. I was engaged one time, but she wasn't up to it. Making fun of his height is what he was doing, making fun of his own height. And so the sheriff was like, yeah, because, he's not really in the mood for joviality after all that's been going on. So he goes outside, and then you see him stop. And so my mind starts like rolling too, because I'm like, well, if he's stopping something, what's that fucking thread that was in that thing? And what is this thing? Taxidermy? So John like stops, and he turns around, and he goes back to the door, and he knocks on it again. And the guy comes, and he's like sort of hunched over, and he's like, hi, yeah, because the guy was like, did you forget something? He was like, no, not really. It's just like, but, I was just wondering, can I ask you a question? Can you actually, like, stand up and show me your height? How tall you are? And so the guy did, and he's like 7 feet tall. I mean, he is tall. You immediately thought, that was the tall guy that was in the restaurant that they didn't show from the way chest up. The tall, skinny guy, because that's what that girl described him as. And I'm like, this is the fucker. This is him. So when he stood up like that, John and him locked eyes, and then the guy slammed the door, and here it came. Here come the showdown, the boss fight. So, meanwhile, you've got Julia screaming to the scene, right? Because she called him on his thing, and she knew where he was. So, she was screaming to the scene while he busted back into the house and gets gutted. How that didn't kill him, I don't know. But the guy like stuck him and like lifted him up off the floor, and how that didn't kill him, I don't know. Just very lucky, I guess. But he continues to chase him. He runs out of the back door, and John is laying there with this big knife wound in his thorax right here, and he looks, and then you see the guy come into view, and he's got this wolf costume on. And John had seen a head in the other room too of that last girl, the ski instructor, not the mother, but the ski instructor. So he knew this was the guy now, and the guy came running towards the back door, and he was wearing this wolf costume without the head part on, and he just kind of like looked at him, and then ran out into the woods, and John followed him, and that guy started to get the better of him again, but then Julia pops out from behind a tree and shoots him, at which point then John puts about 5 bullets in his head, which was interesting because that's what Brianna's boyfriend had said when they went and visited him. They were like, if you catch this guy, do not arrest him, kill him. And I could understand, and that's exactly what John did. So there you go. It wasn't a werewolf. It was a tall, skinny, but very strong taxidermist who was pulling some Jack the Ripper shit all over this town, and very, very satisfying. So now that it's all over, you kind of flash forward. The girl has went to college, his daughter. They've moved her in. You didn't know if he was alive until he walked into the door. So he walked into the door, and you're like, oh, okay, John is still alive. But the last little thing he wanted to pull on you to make him think he was dead was before he walked into the door, Julia pulled out the sheriff's hat, and because the girl said congratulations, and she pulled out the sheriff's hat and put it on, and she was obviously the new sheriff of the town. and then John walked in the door. So you thought maybe you thought he was dead up until that point, and he came in, and um, they all seemed to have made up, and you know he made jokes with his daughter, and that was the end. They left going out um, with him at the quad at the college, hearing guys talk about the fresh meat that was that, and you saw him stop for a second and look over his shoulder, and you thought, is he fixing to go off? Um, but he didn't, so I don't know. I don't know. It still kind of left me wondering if there's something up with him and them canine teeth and the way he looked when those guys said fresh meat. He looked like he was going to kill somebody. So, I don't know. But in any event, obviously, he wasn't the sheriff anymore. There's no telling what kind of damage that done to him, too. He probably has some kind of heart problem now, if you know what I mean. But, yeah, so that was it, and the Faded, and I absolutely loved that movie. So that was The Wolf of Snow Hollow. And yeah, I loved it. So if you have any thoughts about The Wolf of Snow Hollow, have you seen it? Um, Let me know down below. I love talking about these movies, especially the out of the way indie ones that a lot of people don't talk about. And so, yeah, The Wolf of Snow Hollow, released in 2020. Fantastic little movie, horror movie. Uh, Great special effects. The gore in this movie, I didn't see one single thing. Yeah, I didn't see one single thing that I didn't think was real. Um, Excellent, excellent practical effects. There was no CGI in this movie that I saw. It was all practical effects, which was kind of cool. Um, Obviously, they saved money on that budget, but it was excellently done. The practical effects were excellent in this movie. The gory scenes were gory, and they looked real. So, kudos to the production company who made this movie. And that'll do it for The Wolf of Snow Hollow. I will be doing my December collection update where I will talk about and show off the new CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays, music CDs and my DVD and Blu-rays that I picked up for Christmas and during December, including the Christmas haul. So it'll be embarrassingly a lot more than the usual update video. Probably probably about 25 movies, DVDs, and Blu-rays, and about 6 CDs that I bought. So yeah, so I'll be doing that next. We'll be trying to get that out of the way and doing the Christmas and CD and Blu-ray DVD update. Yeah, well, I guess it is. My collection has been upgraded by about 25 movies. So we're going to do that next. Love you, miss you, bye. Thank you for stopping in and checking it out. Please talk to me about movies, this movie, or any movie that you can ask if I have, and would I do a video on it. I will certainly take that under advisement and do it for you, provided I own it. And yeah, we'll go from there. So I will see you in the next video. Love you, miss you, bye. Support indie filmmakers and support indie horror filmmakers and indie horror films. Buy them on Blu-ray or DVD if you can. If you have to, get them for a cheap price on digital if that's the only way you can get them. But yeah, support them in any event. And to those indie horror people and you streaming services, I'm just going to get your movie for free. I'm not going to play this 30 different streaming services game with you. I'm not going to do it. You're ruining the industry by splitting it into fractions and factions. I'm not going to do it. Um, Netflix was the first. I do still have Netflix. I do pay for it every month, and yet I hardly ever use it. But that's it. I'm not doing anymore. I guess it's okay for a person to have one streaming service, but as far as this, oh no, we're going to take everything and split it into 30. If you can afford that, go for it. But I can buy a lot more movies with that money that I own for myself than having to do that. So I'm not going to play that game. I will get your movie for free, and if I like it, I will wait for some sale and give you $5. If you will not release it on a, you know, if you will not release it, you know what I mean? If you won't give me a DVD or a Blu-ray release um, at a reasonable price, I will go get your money for free, and you won't make no money off of it at all. Um, and I will wait for some sale and get it for $4 or $5 on a digital service. But you're not going to make me become a slave to to 20 different streaming services. I'm just not going to do it. I can spend that money on lots and lots of DVDs and Blu-rays that of people that do put them out for us. So yeah, that's my little rant again, which you will hear often about indie companies not doing decent print runs and not giving us releases where we can at a reasonable price for us to buy. You know, you don't have to just do a 10,000 print run. You can do 100,000 print runs, and you will have horror fans that will buy it. But in any event, do your industry thing. But love you, miss you, bye. Always remember, you are a special and unique individual, no matter what anybody is saying to you or doing to you. And no matter how close they are or how betrayed you are a wonderfully unique and special individual, no matter what anybody is saying or doing to you, and no matter what the world is doing to you. You're the only one of you. So, show it, be it, love it, enjoy it. You know what I mean? And I will see you in the next one. It'll be my update video for my collection, and I will see you then. Bye-bye, and keep screaming when appropriate.